Hey everyone, ready to dive into some economics?
Always.
Okay, good. Today we're doing a deep dive that really challenges how we think about money. The stuff we use every day.
Yeah.
We're tackling the fiat standard, and this book, it really digs into how fiat currency, that's the money we use every day,
Yeah.
shapes our world.
It's really interesting, how the author uses Bitcoin as a lens
Oh, yeah.
to kind of examine our current system. Like, imagine you're trying to understand a super complicated car engine,
Right.
and you hold it up next to, like, a simple steam engine.
Okay, yeah, I get you.
They both, get you from point A to point B, but the how and the why,
Totally.
those are the interesting parts, right?
Absolutely. So it's like we're dissecting the DNA of money here.
Yeah, exactly.
Going beyond just like I hand you cash, you hand me a coffee.
Right.
It's bigger than that.
Yeah.
And one of the things I found really fascinating is how the book starts out. It contrasts like the origins of Bitcoin versus the origins of fiat currency. And it's kind of mind-blowing how different those stories are,
Yeah, because Bitcoin was like this meticulously designed thing,
Yeah.
like an architect planning every beam and column
Totally.
versus
Fiat currency's a little.
fiat currencies like,
Yeah. It's more like we just kind of fell into it.
totally, like some centuries-old house that's been like renovated and added on to so many times. You're like, what was the original vision here?
Everybody knows. Nobody knows.
Mm.
It's the result of like political compromises and let's be honest, governments needing to manage their debt.
Okay, so less intentional design, more like a financial game of Jenga.
Right.
Yeah.
And speaking of like building blocks, the book argues that there were really two key features that allowed the fiat system to really take off.
Yeah, it's the rise of fractional reserve banking, where banks lend out more money than they actually have.
Oh, right.
And the whole system of international settlements through central banks.
Okay.
Those are really the two things that, like, made it explode.
Those are the killer apps.
The killer acts of the financial world. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that takes us right to the heart of the matter, which is that the book really dives into what it calls the hidden costs of this whole free money system, something I think, all of us have felt in our own lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the author challenges the way we normally think about inflation.
Yeah.
Like, the official numbers they tell us.
Right.
He's like, that's not the whole story.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, look at asset prices. Look at how much your savings are actually worth now.
Right. It's that feeling you get when you, like, order your favorite takeout.
Yeah.
And the portions are half the size,
Yes.
but it costs twice as much.
Exactly. And that, kind of leads into this concept of time preference distortion,
Okay.
which is basically, when money is easy to come by,
Right.
it changes how we think. We start to prioritize the short term over the long term.
Okay, so unpack that for me a little bit. Like, what does that actually look like in, like, our everyday lives?
Well, think about, like, instead of building a building that's going to last for 100 years, let's just build one as quickly and cheaply as possible. Or, I could eat healthy, but this processed food is really cheap right now.
Oh, I see. Yeah, so it's like this underlying current
Yes.
that influences a lot of our decisions.
Exactly.
Interesting. And he doesn't stop there. He takes on some pretty big targets too, like the IMF and the World Bank.
Yeah. And this is where things get a little spicy.
Okay.
He calls them part of the, quote, misery industry.
Whoa.
Yeah. Now, that's a bold statement. Basically, he's arguing that, these institutions, despite their, good intentions,
Right.
often end up making things worse.
So their solutions might actually be contributing to the problems.
Yeah, exactly. It's,
Yeah.
It's a very complex issue, but it's, it's something to at least,
Right. Makes you think.
think about. And this kind of leads into his whole thing with Bitcoin, which is, he kind of paints it as this potential antidote,
Okay.
Like throughout history, we've always kind of gravitated towards harder forms of money,
Right.
like gold,
Yeah.
something tangible, scarce.
Yeah.
And Bitcoin is like the digital embodiment of that.
So instead of like governments like deciding how much money to print,
Right.
it's all like math and code.
Exactly. It's all decentralized. But, the author doesn't sugarcoat anything.
Okay.
He also lays out the hurdles that Bitcoin faces,
Right.
especially when it comes to like,
Scaling.
There it is.
Yeah.
Like if everyone wanted to like use it all at once,
Right.
that's where these solutions like the Lightning Network come in.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's basically like adding like an express lane to a highway. It's making those transactions smoother, faster, cheaper.
Okay, so it's like an add-on.
It's an add-on, yeah, an additional layer.
Okay. Doesn't that kind of contradict the whole idea of being decentralized, though?
Yeah.
Because it seems like we're back to relying on these intermediaries.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And it's something the author, acknowledges as this kind of like
Tension.
tension, that has to be figured out.
Right, because it's like any new technology.
Right.
There are always these like growing pains and like kinks to work out.
Exactly.
So what's his long-term view?
Yeah.
Like, assuming these hurdles are overcome, where does he see this going?
Well, he sees like this gradual shift, not like this overthrow, but more people opting into, this world of digital scarcity.
Okay.
Choosing Bitcoin because it resonates with them.
Right.
It's a bold prediction. A future where, like, the financial landscape, it looks a lot more like a decentralized network.
Yeah.
Less like this pyramid with central banks at the top.
Oh, wow. Okay, so that's a big shift.
It's a big shift. It's going from, like, a symphony orchestra to, like, a jazz band.
Right, where everyone's kind of like
Improvising.
Yeah. But somehow it works.
But it works.
Okay. All right. I like that analogy.
So, the book doesn't just stay theoretical.
Okay.
It digs into some real-world examples.
Okay.
Like how fiat currency has impacted the buildings we live in, our architecture.
Oh, yes. This is where he compares the two buildings for the Boston Public Library?
Yes.
Yes. I love that example.
Such a good example.
Yeah. Yeah, it really stuck with me.
Because it illustrates how our approach to building has totally changed.
Yeah.
So you have the McKim building, built in the late 19th century.
Right.
This beautiful, majestic space built to last. And then you have the Johnson building, built in the 1970s.
Right.
Which the author criticizes for its, like, minimalist, stark design.
Yeah.
He calls it a, quote, brutalist abomination.
It's not a very beloved building.
No, it's not. But here's the thing. The Johnson building, even though it's much newer,
Right.
it's already needed, like, tons of renovations, costing more than it took to build the original McKim building.
Yeah, it's like opting for the cheapest contractor. You might save up front. In the long run, you're paying more.
And it all comes back to that time preference distortion.
Totally.
Yeah.
But we're like incentivized to build quickly and cheaply.
Exactly.
Even if it means like sacrificing quality and longevity.
It makes you wonder, like, what if we built everything like we were building it for, like, generations to come?
That's a good question. Would we make different choices?
Yeah, would we? It makes you think.
Yeah, it does. It does. And he doesn't stop there. He also draws this connection between like fiat currency and, get this, the food we eat.
Buckle up, because this is where it gets interesting, and some might say controversial.
Okay.
His argument is that easy money, coupled with government meddling in agriculture,
Right.
has really messed with the quality of our food.
Like how processed foods have become like the norm.
Exactly.
Refined grains, sugars everywhere.
Right.
And like fat became the villain.
Yes.
Like our nutritional compass got totally skewed.
And it's not a coincidence. He argues that it's directly tied to the fiat money system.
Okay.
Think about it. Government subsidies make unhealthy foods artificially cheap.
Right.
Who benefits? Not always the everyday consumer.
Right. So it's like we're being incentivized to make unhealthy choices without even realizing it.
And all those agricultural lobbyists.
Oh, yeah. He does not like them.
He does not like them. Because they have too much influence, he argues, over dietary guidelines.
Profits over people.
Exactly. So it's a complex issue.
Right.
But it's definitely an eye-opener. He's drawing this direct line between the nature of our money and the food on our plates.
I like it. And it's not just food, though. He extends this critique to like how fiat currency influences environmental policies.
Yes. Especially on things like renewable energy. He's skeptical. Right.
Right. And he's not saying that renewable energy is bad.
No, no, no.
It's that our approach, the way we're doing it right now, might not be the best.
Yeah.
Or the most sustainable.
It's like we're rushing into solutions that sound good on paper.
Right.
But might not actually be practical.
Yeah.
Huh.
He uses the example of like solar and wind power and how they're not quite ready to fully replace fossil fuels yet.
Because they're intermittent.
Right.
They require these like massive batteries which come with their own environmental concerns.
Right. It's like we're putting the cart before the horse.
Exactly. He also criticizes like government subsidies and mandates.
Oh, yeah?
For distorting the market. Right.
Yeah.
And preventing like actual innovation.
So it's like the government's putting their thumb on the scale.
Exactly.
And it's, again, another example of how easy money can lead to, like, short-sighted thinking.
Short-sighted thinking and unintended consequences.
Yes.
Yeah.
Unintended consequences. Okay.
Exactly.
All right. And speaking of things that might not be sustainable, one of the things I thought was so fascinating was this whole section on fiat science.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that was mind-blowing to me.
It's a bold claim. He's basically suggesting that the way that we fund and conduct scientific research,
Yeah.
especially in areas like climate change,
Right.
has been warped by this, like, availability of easy money.
He's not denying climate change, though, right?
No. He's challenging the prevailing narratives.
Okay.
Like, he's skeptical of the overemphasis on carbon dioxide
Okay.
as, like, the primary driver.
Okay.
He thinks it's led to, like, all this alarmism, these predictions that are not panning out.
Yeah.
And he criticizes, like, the heavy reliance on computer models.
Oh, yeah.
He's like, these computer models, they oversimplify complex systems.
Yeah.
They don't account for natural climate variability.
Right.
And then there's the whole issue of how government funding can create biases in research, right?
Oh, totally, yeah. Pushing certain agendas
Absolutely.
over others, yeah.
So it makes you wonder, like, how much of what we consider settled science is actually influenced by money and politics.
Right. It's like, we hold up science as this, like, purely objective,
right,
impartial thing, but...
But is it really?
Yeah, is it really?
Yeah.
So it all ties back into this bigger point that he's making about, like, how deeply intertwined fiat currency is with so many aspects of our lives.
Yes.
Even the ones that we wouldn't even think about.
It's like the Matrix, right?
Yes.
You start to see the code.
It's everywhere.
Yeah. And that leads us to the final part of the book.
Okay.
Where he grapples with this question of how Bitcoin and the fiat system might interact in the future.
Okay. So, like, what does that future look like? Does he, like, paint us a picture?
Well, he explores a few different scenarios.
Okay.
One is, like, central banks.
Right.
Those big institutions.
Yeah.
He's like, what if they embrace Bitcoin?
Okay.
Like, imagine them holding Bitcoin as a reserve asset.
Whoa. Right.
Alongside their gold.
Alongside their gold. That would be huge.
Yeah, that would be like a huge, like...
Validation.
Like...
Legitimization of it.
That's the signal that Bitcoin has arrived, right?
Yeah.
It could really shake things up for the U.S. dollar.
Oh, yeah, because the dollar's been, like, top dog for a long time.
The big dog. The global reserve currency.
Yeah. But you know what? I feel like some of those central banks, they're going to, like, resist that. Right?
Yeah.
Like, holding on to power.
Of course. He acknowledges that.
Yeah.
He also talks about this idea of, like, peaceful disruption, where Bitcoin kind of gradually replaces fiat.
Okay.
Not through force, but just because people choose it.
It's like, that old saying, if you can't beat them, join them.
Right.
It's like, if you don't like the current system, build a better one, and people will come.
Exactly. And as more people opt into this system based on digital scarcity, the fiat economy shrinks. It's a slow and steady process.
Right.
Not a revolution.
Not a revolution. Okay.
But, it could still fundamentally reshape the financial landscape.
Interesting. Okay, so that's, like, the optimistic view.
Right.
But he also considers, like, some not-so-rosy scenarios, too, right?
Right. Like, what if governments try to shut it all down?
Yeah, they try to squash it.
What if they're like, nope, not having it. This is a threat.
Right, because there's that tension, right, between this whole decentralized nature and governments wanting to, like,
control everything.
Right. And he even, like, outlines this potential dystopian future.
Ooh, okay.
Where, like, governments impose these strict controls on Bitcoin.
Okay.
Trying to limit its use.
So it's like trying to, like...
Put the genie back in the bottle. Put the genie back in the bottle. But you can't. Once it's out, it's out.
Exactly. And this is where it gets really interesting. He argues that these attempts to control Bitcoin, they could backfire.
Wow. How so?
Because when governments create their own centralized digital currencies...
Right, their own, like...
CBDCs.
Okay.
It kind of highlights all the downsides of having, like, this single entity controlling your money.
Okay. So it's like shining a light.
Shining a light on all the things Bitcoin was designed to address.
So it's like those dystopian scenarios actually make Bitcoin more appealing.
Yeah, because people see the contrast.
They're like, oh.
Oh, that's what they're trying to avoid.
Yeah, that's what they're trying to get away from.
Exactly. It's a paradox.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
This whole conversation's really got me thinking. But I got to ask, like, where do we go from here?
Yeah.
Because, like, he doesn't really give us a map, does he?
No, he doesn't. And I think that's like one of the most valuable things about this book. It's not about giving you all the answers.
Right.
It's about making you ask the right question.
Yeah, like that question he leaves us with. If the current system isn't sustainable, then what?
Exactly. What comes next? What kind of monetary system do we want for the 21st century?
It's such a big question.
It is a big question. And he's like, I don't have all the answers.
Right.
But we need to be asking these questions.
Yeah. It's like he's throwing down a gauntlet, right?
Yes.
It's like, okay, we need to be more informed.
Informed.
More engaged.
Engaged.
Not just like passive consumers, just taking whatever's handed to us.
We have a say in this.
Yeah, we have a say in this. Okay, I like that. So there you have it, folks. Our deep dive into the Fiat Standard. It's a book that really makes you think, and I think that's a good thing.
Absolutely. It's a call to action.
Yes.
To be informed, be engaged, and help shape the future of money.
Well said. And on that note, we're going to leave you with this. What kind of financial world do you want to see? Think about it, talk about it, and engage with those ideas. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.